Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to the Weekly Wake Up, where we raise the alarm on what's really happening in our country. Though with recent events, I'm not sure anybody knows. This show is part of the Real Agenda network of podcasts for political change. And today, we're going to be talking about the world's big sleep out. And our main feature is going to be about inclusive capitalism. But first, let me introduce the team. And welcome back, Satya. How are you doing?
Hi, Tom. I'm really good. Nice to be here.
I'm glad to hear it. You've been travelling again, haven't you?
I have, yes. Yeah. I went to Toronto, actually.
Well, I'm sorry we missed you last week. So what's your subject?
Well, I'm going to talk about the world's big sleep out, which is a campaign designed to get 1 million people out of homelessness and into accommodation. So we're going to talk about that later.
Oliver's back. Hi, Oliver. Good to see you. You've got the big subject today.
Have I? Yes. Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
Another hard week at work, eh?
As always.
This is it when you're at the top of the corporate ladder, I suppose.
In inverted commas, obviously.
Yeah. Our man in the city there, Oliver. Hey, and we've got a big treat this week. We welcome a new recruit, and that's Zoe. Hi, Zoe. How you doing?
Yeah, good. I wouldn't oversell the treat. I was surprised to be roped in today. So.
Well,
it's great to have you here.
Tell us a bit about your background, Zoe.
Well, I'm Australian, believe it or not. I'm from WA.
Western Australia.
The other side of Australia from, the big powerhouses of Sydney and Melbourne. But I've been living in the UK for close to 18 months.
And you're studying something very exciting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'm doing a master's in radio at Goldsmiths. Still trying to push the final assignments over the deadlines.
Good. Well, we look forward to you taking over this show and helping us out with all the production and editing and all the other fine things that you are an expert in.
Again, big treat, expert. It's a bit overselling, I think.
It's nice to have you here today. So that's the four of us all together. So just a reminder that we're always looking for new people like Zoe or anybody that's would like to be interested to help us with content, production or marketing. So do contact us now if you'd like to be involved, and also let us know what you think about the Real Agenda. You can email us at info@realagenda.org. Now today's show, the Weekly Wake Up, consists of 4 panellists, well, if you include me. So we've got 4 of us here today, which is great. Each chooses a topic which we've just talked about related to a recent event or media story connected to the fundamental issues of reducing inequality, resolving poverty and bringing greater social and economic justice, as that's the Real Agenda. And we'd like to discuss all this with a review to how things can be resolved and what we, the people, can do about it. We're now going to get on with our conversation today, and Satya's going to lead us into having a chat. Go on then, Satya.
Yes.
What are you going to talk about?
So I wanted to just raise people's awareness and bring to everyone's attention the world's big sleep out, which is a campaign that's designed to help people out of homelessness and into accommodation. And their objective is to help 1 million people across the world to find accommodation and, get a roof over their head. And if we just look at figures in the UK, for example, and these are taken from Shelter, which is the housing charity, in Britain we have over 320,000 people who are homeless, and that's spread out across our country. And it includes people who are living in temporary accommodation, rough sleepers, and also people who are in hostels and so on. But Shelter also raises awareness about the hidden homeless. And these are people who might be sofa surfing, who actually don't have a home of their own and are sleeping on friends' floors and on their sofas, or even people who are sleeping in their cars at night, which is very scary.
When people are talking about homeless, they're talking about the people on the street, but that's only a small percentage of it. I mean, it's a very serious problem, but the rough sleepers is different than the homeless. One of the campaigns we're involved in here, particularly focused on Haringey in North London. There's a huge number of people in temporary accommodation. It's not just Haringey, it's all over the country, but this is sometimes forgotten that people are being shifted on and moved on, but they're still nevertheless homeless, and it's this insecurity of not having a home.
Absolutely.
That's a problem.
Absolutely.
What do you think, Oliver?
As we get coming into the winter months, this problem becomes much more acute. But just to widen, I guess the homelessness actually is one issue, but it has knock-on effects on people being able to secure jobs, having sort of self-respect and confidence. And so those other sort of life issues which people face can all sort of derive from homelessness.
Even getting benefits if you don't have a place that you can call home. So you need an address in many cases to be able to get benefits or to be able to sign on. And if you don't have an address, and this is for particularly in terms of rough sleepers, what do you do about that? And it's a spiral that just is ever decreasing, isn't it?
There's not enough being done. That's quite clear.
That we do know.
So what else is going on this?
The campaign is encouraging is for people to have a sleep out and to raise money through that. And it's happening on the 7th of December. And it's going to be global. So in many, many countries are going to be involved in this. They're going to have, one of the things they're doing in London is that they're going to have celebrities telling stories. So I think it's in Trafalgar Square that Helen Mirren is going to read a
bedtime story.
A bedtime story.
Oh, good. What's she going to read?
So it doesn't say what. It doesn't actually say what she's going to read, but she's going to read a bedtime story to everyone.
Wouldn't it be great if she just freestyled it?
Wouldn't it? Just made it up as she went along. Yeah. But I would really love to encourage everyone to get involved in this because I think it's a great cause, particularly now with the run up to Christmas. Particularly for some of those rough sleepers, your heart just goes out to them. Is how do they cope in that? You just need to go onto the website and look up the world's big sleep out and get involved, really.
But most people who become rough sleepers are because they're unable to pay their rent.
Yeah.
And why are they unable to pay the rent? Because it's so expensive. And why is it so expensive? Because the price of land. And that takes us on the whole track about rent and the ridiculous prices of property, which makes it very difficult. And also then the wages are low. So we've got the minimum wage is not enough to live off. And then you've got welfare benefit, which is not enough, if you're on welfare benefit, not enough to live off. So it is not surprising. It's not just about building houses, but it's actually about solving these underlying problems.
Absolutely. And I think you make some really great points, Tom. And the great thing about this campaign is that the biggest thing is about raising awareness and putting some pressure on those politicians who we know can do something about it and actually don't have the political will to do it. The more people that get involved in this campaign, it can be used to actually raise awareness and put pressure on the people who have the power to change it.
I think something that is quite disturbing is that there are already empty flats and houses and apartments all through London, but the developments tend to be luxury developments. I mean, I know there's an ongoing court battle concerning it's not residential, this particular area, but Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre has a lot of Latin American traders particularly. Delancey's building a high-rise. I think it might be the third in about 10 years of these. It's not Delancey who did the previous two luxury developments, but in the area, essentially, buildings that don't include socially rented houses, that don't have affordable rents. And of course, even the traders won't be able to continue to operate in those areas, which means that even if you did get a flat at an affordable rate, if you've been living in the area for a long time, you might not find it feasible to, get groceries. And it's a really multifaceted problem, and it's something that I think we've really got to tackle on a whole bunch of fronts. And I think maybe inclusive capitalism sort of comes into that, the idea that the way that we're living right now is just fundamentally not sustainable.
That piece on BBC in the last week about community land trusts, and the angle of the story was that people could, in fact, buy these houses at significantly, reduced for the typical rent. And why can they do that? Paul Reagan, who's actually the chairman of the London Community Land Trust, and it was about the places they built or converted, but because they owned the land, the rents or the sale of the properties were only related to the cost of the building. So they were about a third, I forget the actual amount were, but people were being able to get 1 or 2 bedroom flats for an affordable rate, and also to be able to rent them, because the cost of land averages about 70% of the cost of a house or property or apartment. And therefore, if you take land out and that's publicly owned, and then people just buy or rent the property, it's more affordable.
Tom, you make it sound so easy.
Well, in my view, it is easy. Easy may not be the right word, but there is an answer to do that. And if local authorities, who can actually now raise the money to buy land, and they keep it in public ownership, but then they convert, because a lot of these, I think one of the ones of the Community Land Trust is Converted Hospital. And there are several of these community land trusts around the country. And it's an obvious way.
Yeah.
Why do we want to buy? A property is not an investment. It should be a home. People want homes. So there you go.
And I think that's one of the things that this campaign will raise awareness about, is that there are answers here. But it will take courage and vision of somebody who's determined to make this happen. We can do it. We need to get to those people to make them see that.
It is somewhat distressing when you see the Minister for Housing on a radio programme saying, one of the ways to solve this is to build more houses. Yeah, I know. But you've got these other things as well. And
they
also
can
the Institute
do,
of Health and
yes.
Affairs said, well, it's obvious if we build more houses, the price will go down.
Zoe made a very good point that there's so many houses, well, particularly in and around London, that are lying empty. If we were just to reclaim those, actually get people living in those, that would go some way to help that situation.
My God, the thought of someone living in a luxury apartment who, isn't a CEO or something. I don't know. It's
Wouldn't it be fantastic?
Yeah.
I think it's also, actually, you mentioned about Elephant Castle. I think it's just not an isolated problem. It has spillover effect, because when you mentioned about, the traders being priced out of that area, that goes to the problem of gentrification. You're pushing in a different class of people to push out the indigenous population, and I think, it has been shown, I think, in Lewisham, in Hackney, and in Waltham Forest, where this has happened, it's created quite a lot of friction between people, and this goes to the heart of our problems we're facing in today's society. I think what you need to do, you need to bring people along who already live in that area, not exclude them completely, and put, have high prices in flats, sort of bijou fruit and veg stalls and things like that. So you need to sort of integrate the communities, not create exclusion, which is, I think, by unintentionally what these...
Just give us those dates and information, Satya,
So
again.
it's the world's big sleep out. It's happening on the 7th of December, and we say get involved.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next topic, which is inclusive capitalism. And Oliver's going to introduce that topic, Oliver.
Yes,
Kick
I am.
us
So
off.
now, I guess
Inclusive
why I
capitalism.
want to talk about inclusive capitalism, which seems to me actually a buzzword now alongside diversity and inclusion, but it's an important topic. I think partly because I guess a potential election coming up actually, and Labour have very radical plans. I think what they call inclusive capitalism. John McDonnell, he has a vision, and at the heart of his policy is to redistribute income and assets and ownership and power. And his basic mission is to shift power from capital to labour, shareholders and landlords, and put it in the hands of workers, consumers and tenants. On the back of this, actually, I read a report today in the Financial Times that's come out with quite a big series on capitalism. Catchline is basically capitalism needs a reset. And for me, this does go to the heart of many of the topics we've been discussing. And so I think it's worth sort of opening up the discussion to talk about some of the policies that Labour have proposed and whether they're actually feasible, given that they've claimed they want to stay within the sort of fiscal guidelines.
One of the things that they were saying in that article is that capitalism hasn't been working for quite a long time. And we're talking about the FT, who are the proponents
Absolutely.
of capitalism and have always been so. And if they're questioning it, one has to think, hang on a minute, voices are getting louder and more people are joining in to say, actually, capitalism as we know it does not work. And it doesn't work because there's such a discrepancy between the people who have a lot, so the rich, and the people who have very little, the poor. And that gap is widening and the people at the bottom are getting bigger.
And interestingly, actually, in America, there's a business group, one of the largest actually in America, called the Business Roundtable, who actually, they promoted capitalism because they had a lot of sort of CEOs of banks on as part of their membership, but they have urged companies to consider the environment and workers' well-being alongside their pursuits of power. And this is actually quite an important shift for them, actually, because it's essentially saying, well, in my opinion, that, as Satya says, capitalism isn't working. Almost capitalism is dead and needs a rethink. And I mean, to my mind, I think it needs to rethink. I don't think it needs to go back to the radical policies of what the Labour government proposal, but I think the checks and balances that should have been in place aren't in place or weren't in place, and it's just got out of control.
So this is, and then this brings us to how we deal with it. So one of the things here is that it has been that the purpose of the corporation is to create profit for the benefit of shareholders. Yeah. And that really is where it hasn't worked, because it's meant that it's been accumulated by a few. So therefore it's now what we should now be talking about is considering the other stakeholders. I'm not saying people aren't doing it, but there are more stakeholders in this, and also the environmental and social aspects of a business. So this is where the shift seems to be going, which is absolutely right. So we move past the shareholders and we're talking about the stakeholders. And if we can do that by various means, we can make capitalism more inclusive, because by the nature of it, that's what it is.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of an ideological bias here, but I think regardless of where you sort of swing on the political spectrum, we're at a particularly interesting time right now because of automation and the fact that most traditional industries just don't function the way they used to and can't ever function the way they used to. It just doesn't make sense. So a lot of the work that lower income people are doing are, kind of like a lot of busy work, to be honest, like lots of sales, lots of like telemarketing, which ultimately will be automated. People have been calling for a shorter working week for centuries. Since I think Bertrand Russell called for a 15-hour work week, and now we're at a point where, not only is there this enormous divide between the wealthiest and the poorest, but also it's going to be increasingly hard to find unskilled work or low-skilled work. It's going to be increasingly hard to find work full stop. Even higher level work. People talk about industries like the law might become increasingly automated. Lower level legal work, just you don't need someone to do it in 5-10 years' time. It can be done by a machine. I think we are going to have to really radically frame the way work functions.
Yeah. I think, Zoe, that's a really, really important point. But I was listening to someone talking about this just a few weeks ago. One of the things they were saying that actually that automation of the workforce and the way that we run our societies is going to make the inequality, or could make the inequality, even worse. Because what's going to happen is, if you take the example of Uber, for example. So with Uber, that's all automated. People don't have to learn anything. It's very unskilled work. Actually, all a driver has to do, like, for example, black cabs in London, they used to have to do the knowledge. You had to go through some training, some learning before you could even become a cab driver, and that put your skill levels up. But these Uber drivers, all they have to do is follow an app and to do their work. But the people, sorry, I'll just make this point, that the people who actually earn the money are the people who have invented the app, and now they are the elitists. And if we have more and more of that, the well-educated, the elites will actually be running society more. That's an argument.
I have to disagree with that actually on a couple of levels. First of all, the black cab drivers, they essentially created a monopoly, which the negatives of the monopoly are quite well known. But with the Uber drivers, yes, I agree actually that the owners of that capital are part of the elite and I guess consolidating their positions. But for the drivers, and I've actually taken Uber quite a few in recent weeks and spoken to some of them, and for a lot of them it does create flexibility, because some of them have main jobs in addition to being an Uber driver. We need to recognise is that those owners of that capital are potentially could be doing more to create that more inclusive society, putting more back into reinvesting in their business, which is where the shift occurred. I think this is...
Absolutely they could, because we mentioned it the other day, but one of the founders of Uber, invested 75 million in a new mansion in Beverly Hills or somewhere like that. Uber isn't still making a profit. It might be a huge corporation, have a very high value, but these guys are extracting money and using it for their own purpose, and I don't, that's not inclusive.
So I wasn't actually making the point about the rights or the wrongs of Uber and their workers. The point actually was that all this automation, artificial intelligence, actually creates an elite, could create an even more extreme elite, which is what we're trying to stop through inclusive capitalism.
I will say that one of the really upsetting things about Uber that I think kind of illustrates this problem, and it's not just Uber though, but this is the fundamental problem, is that even though, I mean, it seems like low-skilled work, what Uber involves is like staying awake for very long hours and getting paid very little, not getting compensated for this untenable work. And ultimately, if self-driving cars eventually come in, it's work that won't exist at all. So you already have people who are doing work that's deeply unsatisfying, I'm sure, if you're awake for 12 hours a day and seeing very little profit from that, like personal profit, not profit, but compensation. It's just unsustainable. And people who get forced into jobs like driving Ubers, it's work that, I can't see a place for it in 5-10 years' time, and people suffer.
That's absolutely, and I think we're going to talk a lot more about this. But just also from the Financial Times, from the editor of the Financial Times, I was heartened to read a part of that says the long-term health of free enterprise capitalism will depend on delivering profit with purpose, which incidentally happens to be the title of our new series on the Real Agenda, or Profit for Purpose. So check that out and give that a listen. One other thing I would like, just talking about inclusive capitalism, I actually had listened to a video from the Coalition for Inclusive Capitalism, which seems to be the founder is one of the Rothschild gang, so known as a very wealthy family. And one of the interesting things there was, though she said some of the right things about we might want to pay people more and consider all the stakeholders, she certainly wasn't in favour of wealth taxes or higher income taxes.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise.
And also, one of the things that she mentioned was that, she said, well, the poorest people have their homes and it's the most important asset. Well, obviously, the poorest people don't have their homes, and they don't own homes. They're not even in a position to own homes. And this, obviously, just gives you the feeling that some people missed out. So I'm not decrying what she's trying to do on some of the things, that any step in this direction is positive, but got to take a wider view on it.
And just as a general note, I think we do need to recognise the positive aspects that sort of, I guess, globalisation, capitalism has brought into liberalisation and sort of foreign direct investment into our economy in particular. But I think the key for me is about the excesses it has created in terms of, I guess, elites, owners of capital, and not recognising to bring people along with them in terms of their workers, but also in them there not being, I guess, sufficient checks and balances, not necessarily over-regulation.
And I just think as bad as the global financial crisis was, it's actually done some good in two ways. One was we always believe that government shouldn't, or capitalist governments believe that government should not get involved in economics and business and try and reset the economy. Or that they need to do less regulation. But what the financial crisis did do was that governments had to get involved and they had to have more regulation. And actually, that is what we need in terms of, as we go forward, the government has a huge responsibility in terms of resetting this whole process of how our whole economic system is set, and they can get involved and they can regulate against some of these excesses that we have.
What I just want to say is actually, I guess some of the policies of Labour government in terms of nationalising a lot of the industries, I guess capping, I guess bonuses and the like, may not necessarily be the right approach, because it's going to cost an awful lot of money, which I don't think they've actually justified yet. But I think some elements of their policy, I think I do agree with.
Well, I mean, some of the things I was thinking about is having more co-ops, having more people, the workers having ownership within companies, within businesses, sharing profits and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and I think if we could do
we all
that,
create the wealth. We
all create the wealth.
Yeah. It's just accumulated by a few. It's time to go time, as they say. I think we're right out of time. This is a very interesting subject, and I think it's going to come up a lot more because it has a big effect on inequality and how we actually create the wealth in this country and how it's shared more. So that won't go away, and it's very important to talk about the answers. Anyway, hope we've woken you up a bit and that we've helped to inform, inspire, and you'll want to get involved in making change happen. Now, you can email us at info@realagenda.org, or you can contact us via our website, realagenda.org. There's now 5 series of podcasts on the Real Agenda Network. In addition to the weekly Wake Up, there is the Real Agenda, which is the original podcast. We've got Around the House, where we talk to MPs who are determined to make a difference. We have another series called Challenges for Change, where we come conversations with inspiring campaigners. And our most recent one, Profit for Purpose, about being a better business. And all these you can subscribe individually online. They're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and so on, or you can get all of them if you subscribe to The Real Agenda. So that's what we're doing to try and get the message out that we can bring change, that are opportunities to do that, and that there are things that we can do. So do stay tuned to The Real Agenda Network. And special thanks to our sponsors, the Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com, and don't just take my word for it. Reverse Media Group was just listed as the 9th fastest growing private tech company in the UK. So one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for the people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. So it's goodbye from
Goodbye
the team.
from me, Satya.
Thanks for having me. I'm Zoe.
It's goodbye from Oliver.
And indeed, that's The Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.